Imagine the year is 1980. Your mom had just escaped Cambodia and have been living in a refugee camp in Thailand. There you were born. 5 years later, you and your mother came to the United States as refugees, settling in Florida. Soon your mom met your stepfather and moved to San Diego. You witnessed their relationship that is shaped by violence and threats of deportation. In turn, your mom verbally and physically abused you. By 17, you met a man online who became your boyfriend. You soon learn that he is using the same tactics your stepfather used on your mom to control you. You tried, but you failed to escape the relationship. Instead, you end up spending 16 years in prison for a murder charge. On the day you were released after being granted parole, ICE agents were standing by to detain you, wanting to deport you to Cambodia, a land that you have never stepped foot on before. This is the story of Nainon, one of the many stories at survivedandpunished.org. According to ACLU, almost 60% of women who are in prison have a history of physical or sexual abuse, with some prison population as high as 94%. The Criminal Alien Program, CAP, is ICE's largest deportation program. Between 2004 and 2016, the budget of CAP grew from $3.3 million to $316 million. US has a long history of public charge for immigrants. When deciding whether to grant an applicant a green card or an extension of a visa, an immigration officer must determine whether the individual is likely to become a public charge. That is, primarily dependent on government for support. All these at the immigration officer's discretion. To put things in context, interracial marriage, abortion, and women applying for credit cards or housing loans were considered illegal in 1952 when the Immigration and Nationality Act was enacted. Exemptions were made for wives of Korean War service members and their children. But due to discrimination from their own families, many of these marriages did not last. Over a period of the Cold War, many Americans also adopted Korean, Chinese, and Southeast Asian orphans. Congress passed the US Refugee Act to accept Cold War victims from Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. 1994 was a landmark year in America's criminal justice history. VAWA was a huge win that helped establish the Department of Justice's Office of Violence Against Women. Supporters of VAWA faced pushback from conservatives when trying to expand the legislation to include funding for Native Americans, same-sex couples, and sex trafficking victims, so much so that by 1996, DOMA and DONAS Don't Tell were enacted, while IRA marked the beginning of the fast-track deportation process of many refugees, asylees, and immigrants. At the turn of the century, Congress enacted the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Prevention Act to investigate serious human trafficking crimes in which immigrant women and children can be vulnerable to. In this legislation, special T&U visas offer immigration relief for victims of specific extreme human trafficking crimes, while VAWA continued to expand in 2000 and again in 2005. Most recently, while we are all busy social distancing and sheltering in place, The final rule publication for public charge of 2019 just went into effect in August this year. So, what does all this mean? The public charge has no impact on citizens. But to uninformed citizens, the public charge can be a lever that shifts the blame of the imperfect citizenry onto immigrants without cultural humility and proper legislations that support rehabilitation. When environmental safety decreases along with immigration status stability, fear and violence amplifies within these communities, further fracturing the cohesiveness among different immigrant identities. But people like Nai knows there is no perfect victim. That means that anyone trying to find someone else to blame, the blame may ultimately fall onto the shadow of the perfect victim, the most vulnerable individual. The Asian Women's Shelter was established in 1988 after their founders volunteered at a shelter in San Francisco discovered that clients who don't speak English as their first language would rather go back to their abusers than to stay at the shelter. The bridging of language barrier continues to be AWS's staple service after 30 years. To date, AWS maintains two main branches, their direct services branch and their community building branch. They also have a 5-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, making it the smallest shelter in the Bay Area. Many of AWS's partner organizations are also members of the San Francisco Domestic Violence Consortium. The consortium is made up of 17 diverse agencies that represents grassroots communities, faith-based services for transitional housing, legal assistance, research think tanks, and law enforcement arms dedicated to handle domestic violence. The executive director of the consortium coordinates and implements action steps developed at the monthly meetings, secures and manages grants for the consortium's operating budget. With the consortium managing the services and finance resources for its members agencies, AWS is free to focus on providing what it does best, providing language support to various agencies in and around the Bay Area. Very often, a DV case requires the client to file a restraining order. It is usually by chance that staff learn in our conversation with clients that they are victims of trafficking, since many of the clients do not know their rights. AWS, the consortium, government agencies, and civil society all needs to collaborate with each other under what perhaps Hayek calls spontaneous order. I quote, "Spontaneous order is a system which has developed not through the central direction of one or a few individuals, but through the unintended consequences of the decisions of myriad individuals, each pursuing their own interest through voluntary exchange, cooperation, and trial and error." With this, I end my presentation. Thank you.